The great American economist Thomas Sowell has told a story about how French police are following a burglar. The burglar runs into a building. It's a big building and they don't have the manpower to surround the building, so they surround the building next door. When the supervisor shows up and asks why they're surrounding that building while the burglar is in the other building, they say, well, this is what we can do. In some ways, that's how far too many police operations react to the issue of gun violence. They don't know how to deal with hardened criminals that are using guns, and so they turn to harassing law-abiding gun owners, not the criminals. In Surrey, British Columbia, they've had a spate of shootings recently. It's a great cause for concern, but most of it is gang-driven. The response of the RCMP? They're going to start checking in on law-abiding gun owners. Check out this story from radio station CKNW in Vancouver. I want to read you this particular quote. It is from RCMP, Surrey RCMP Assistant Commissioner Bill Forty, who says the goal is to keep weapons from potentially ending up on the street. Our aim is to reduce the number of illegally owned and unregistered firearms in Surrey, as well as enhance public and police officer safety. The majority of gun-related crimes in Canada are committed with guns that are domestically sourced. That's why they say they're going around to the homes of people who were registered to own restricted firearms to make sure that they're up to date, that everything is on the up and up. That's how you're going to deal with gang violence? Is this really the right way to deal with it? Tony Bernardo is with the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, joins me now. And Tony, I'm just gobsmacked at this. I mean, we've joked about police making these types of moves before, but now they're actually doing it and defending it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, remember, there was never a legal system put into place that they never used, okay? So it was bound to happen eventually. But, I mean, realistically, this man needs a license for his mouth because the stuff that he's talking about here is completely and totally untrue.
All right, let's deal with a couple of things first.
Sure.
Going to the homes of people, just to clarify, I was explaining this story to somebody earlier today. They said, well, I thought they got rid of the gun registry. But if you own restricted firearms, they're still registered, correct? Or at least they know that you have them.
Well, yeah, I mean, people have firearms licenses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the firearms license is an indication as to whether or not you may have a firearm. Now, we're dealing here with restricted and prohibited firearms, and those things are registered still to this day. So they're going around home to home, checking for the people who have legally owned restricted and prohibited firearms where they may have expired, or of course they may not either. They don't really say that. But for the assistant commissioner to blame these law-abiding people, well, I mean, that's just purely disingenuous.
Is there any evidence that owners of restricted firearms, be they a handgun, an AR-15, is there strong evidence that they're supplying gangs in this country with firearms?
No, the strong evidence is exactly the opposite.
But hold on, the assistant commissioner said these guns are domestically sourced.
Well, that's what I say. The assistant commissioner doesn't know what he's talking about on this thing.
All right, fill us in.
The Vancouver PD reported 97% of the firearms they seized as crime guns came from outside the country. Well, that's the Vancouver PD's right beside Surrey.
I doubt the criminals have two completely different systems that stop at the city boundary. Because
I really doubt it.
I'm sure you've been there as I have. You don't know where one begins and the other ends.
And even if you did, would a criminal care?
No.
And then, the assistant commissioner's working with NWES. That's the National Weapons Enforcement Support Team. That's Canada's gun cops. I don't know that most of your listeners probably don't even know that we have gun cops, but we do. And National Weapons Enforcement Support Team was doing a British Columbia push several years ago, and they reported 94% of the guns used in crimes in British Columbia came from outside the country.
Wow. So 97% in one study, 94% in another. Overwhelmingly, we're talking about criminals who are buying guns, mostly smuggled in from the United States, but I'm going to guess on the West Coast there might be some trade with Asia as well.
Absolutely, and Russia.
And Russia. And so this is the reality that the police forces are dealing with, and yet it's like that Thomas Sowell story I told at the beginning. They don't know how to stop it. They don't know how to stop the flow of guns. They don't know how to deal with the criminals and stop them from shooting each other and potentially innocent civilians. So they're going after guys that went out, took the safety course, got their background checks, got their license, and legally purchased firearms.
Absolutely, that's how that works. And that's why the entire gun control system in Canada is completely and totally flawed. It's just an absolute mess.
It's aimed at the wrong people, unfortunately, and Assistant Commissioner Forty, I think, is just proving that police are on the wrong track on this. I think it makes police forces look bad, and I think it takes some of the people that would naturally lean towards supporting law enforcement look at them askance, let's say.
Well, and the other thing too is that calling attention to the fact that you're unable to deal with a crime problem by blaming people who have nothing to do with your crime problem really does not enhance your personal credibility within your own community.
No, not at all. Tony, have you been following what's happening at the federal level in terms of firearms legislation? There were promises of changes coming through. I'm up here on the Hill all the time. I haven't heard of any moves in the last little while, but I know you keep your ear close to the ground for law-abiding gun owners across the country. What are you picking up lately?
Well, I mean, Brian, right now there's not a ton of stuff happening on the Hill. It seems that the government there has its hands full of a whole bunch of other issues, but we are hearing some disturbing things. In the rumor floating around that the minister staff went to England to examine their firearms laws, and of course the dreaded UN marking system is rolling down the tracks, scheduled for implementation on June 1st, 2017. This is really seriously bad. People need to pay attention to this.
All right, Tony Bernardo, Canadian Shooting Sports Association, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Brian. Always good.
Thanks for watching. Click here to never miss a Rebel update. Want even more of the Rebel? Well, click here to become a premium member.